Hi, everybody. I am Lauren Yost. I teach microbiology here at OSU OKC, and I know that some of us are looking for some help on figuring out how to do our assessments. And it's that time of year where we're having our data, we can collect it and compile it and put it into those forms. So for those of you who are feeling a little bit lost and need a little bit more guidance on how to complete your assessment forms and how you should be filling them out and what data needs to go in there and what words you should write on the forms and all of that, I'm here to try to give some kind of guidance there to help you guys with that until we can get a more formal training plan in place for everybody. So I'm going to walk you through my process of how I am doing one of my outcomes that I'm assessing for this semester, fall of 2024, and how I'm collecting my data and putting that into the forms as needed for assessment. So let me share this with you. So we're going to start let me share my screen with you guys. Let's start with the screen here. Okay, great. So I'm gonna make a lot of noise while I do this, apparently. Let's see. So for the science department, which is the department that I work for and microbiology, and I'm a lead instructor, so I am responsible for getting my assessment stuff taken care of. And so this is what our our assessment plan for science looks like right now. And I've gone through and I've highlighted all of fall of 2024 here in our assessment plan. And this is the whole thing, but going down to the actual assessment, the objectives that are covered on the assessment plan. We have our science ones that are specific to science. So I've gone through and I've highlighted all of fall of 2024 and um, in either gray or yellow. I highlighted it in yellow to show you the ones that I'm responsible for this semester. So fall 2024, I'm responsible for student learning outcome, science learning outcome number one, which is students will discuss major contributions of scientists that impact modern society. Also going down, you can see the ones that we're responsible for this semester, but I am also responsible for number five, which is students will practice appropriate safe laboratory techniques for this semester. And then that's it for me for this semester for the science ones. And then we also are held as a department responsible for campus-wide ones. And so the ones that we're responsible for this semester is, of course, the campus-wide student learning objective number three, which is students use computer and network technologies to analyze and communicate information. And one of the specific methods that is identified here is what a survey that's embedded in a course, but I'm also providing my documentation for my course to cover this. That is not an embedded survey. And I'm going to show you how I do my campus-wide one so you can see based that on how you want to assess your side of the campus wide if you're dealing with that. Or this should apply to essentially pretty much any learning objective that you would be doing for assessment. So let me walk you through my campus-wide learning objective really quickly. So I have all of my learning objectives basically set up on my Canvas. So I'm going to stop sharing really quick so I can hide any of my students' information in case this gets disseminated out onto the internet somehow. I don't want their grades out there for everybody. But I had on my Canvas aligned my learning objectives for the campus and for science and also for my course in Canvas. Now, I know that we are not required to provide evidence for our course learning objectives, but I like to make sure that I'm staying on track with what I say I'm teaching in my course. This is a really easy way for me to keep track of that when I want to. But as far as what I need to do, then we need to look at our campus-wide. And from us, it's a departmental learning objectives. For you guys, it might be program, whatever it is for you. I have mine all aligned on Canvas. Now, if you don't have that, that's okay. We can talk about how that's done in another video and how to better make that work for you in another video. So when I'm collecting my data, I'm not going to pull it from my aligned thing on Canvas. I'm actually going to pull it directly from the assignment on Canvas so that you can see what it would look like if you were doing that for yourself as well. So back to the screen. This is my outcome page. So on the far left side over here with our blue links over here, we have outcomes here. It's not visible to students, but it's visible to me. So I would click on that. It takes me to all my outcome groups. Now I have already aligned this. And again, I can show you guys how to do this if you're interested in the future. It really takes very little work to continue it from semester to semester, but the upfront work is a little bit heavy to get it set up. It's not something that you're going to do in 20 minutes. So you will have to get all of your assignments that you choose to be aligned with that outcome and then define the outcome and everything like that. So for me, I've already aligned my outcomes with assignments. And so I just have to go here and find that. Now, if you are having a hard time finding an assignment that you feel like aligns well with whatever your outcome is, just off the top of your head, then maybe discuss that with your department head or your lead instructor or whatever it is who you might be working with on this. But I have done this stuff ahead of time, so I'm going to show you how I have it laid out. So for my course, I have my campus-wide student learning objectives. For those learning outcomes that we're going to be measuring with our assessment. So the campus-wide student learning outcome number 3, students use computer and network technologies to gather, analyze, and communicate information. All right, so I actually have, if I click on this, it will basically let me look at the alignments. So this will be able to show me all of the assignments that I've aligned with this learning objective. Now, if I were to click on this, does show me some of my sensitive student information. So I am not going to click on that actively right now, but it does show me all of the assignments that I have aligned with it. And so I can select the one that I feel like is most appropriate because I have a few aligned for each of these. So I'll select the one that I feel like is most appropriate for this assessment. And then, and for the data that I have for this semester or whatever it is. And the one that I chose to go with for this semester is my Unit 3 group project. So I pulled that up here. And I have my whole entire assignment, just what it would be on Canvas for my students here. I have the description of the project and what's expected of the students. And then I have how it was actually assigned to them and when it was due, as well as my rubric that I used to grade this based on their accuracy, their thoroughness, their effort, and their quality, and what have you. So this is for grading for the actual assignment for itself and not necessarily focusing on just that campus-wide learning objective. And if I wanted to assess that separately, I've included it in my rubric to say, for the specific aspect of this assignment regarding this student learning outcome, what would I rate that mastery? And you can do that per student. In this case, this is graded per group. So each student in each group gets the same grade for the group. So anyways, having assessed that and looking at that, we're going to collect this data and apply it into our assessment. So again, let me unshare this so I can pull up my data and show you guys without any student information. So just briefly, stare at my face again. And let me see, pull up my grade book and then this. All right. All right. So this is what I was looking at. And again, I've covered up my student information here so we can't see their names or their IDs or anything, but we can see their grades. And I've just pulled up all of their unit projects here in my filters for all of my sections. And I have a combined course essentially with all 4 of my sections in one Canvas course. So I can see all of my students' results for my Unit 3 project, which is the one that I've chosen to represent this particular learning outcome. So we will be able to go to export up here in the upper right once I pull up just that data that I need. And you can pull out all of the data for your entire course if you want to, but for this, I just have that set of projects, and that one project will be included in that. So what I'm going to do is click export and then click on current grade book view. So you don't need the whole grade book necessarily for that. So I would click on that and I would be able to share that. Um, and then I will come back over here and drag over this. And so I blacked out all of my students' information on this particular screen so that you can look at the data with me. So what I did was, I didn't black it out on this other screen, but I just pasted that information, or I opened up the exported information into an Excel book. And then I copied the student names, which is relevant to me when I'm trying to organize my data, and their grades and whether they met the benchmark or not, which I'll go over what that is here in a moment. All right. Sorry, I'm getting these notifications and I want them to be quiet. All right. So, anyways, so I had gathered the information that I needed from that pasted in file. And let me see if I, yes, I did. Okay, good. Never mind. I did black it out. So lucky you. So this is what that file will look like once you have uploaded it or exported it and then opened it from your downloads. And I save it as an Excel spreadsheet because then the data is, you can save it and manipulate it better in Excel when it is an actual Excel spreadsheet. So anyways, so here's all of that data. And all I needed was my student name, which would have been column A. We're not going to see that because I blacked it out for their, privacy reasons. Then I have the Unit 3 group project grade, and then how many points it's possible, which is this box up here. And I have taken that information and put it into my assessment data spreadsheet over here. Just copied and pasted it as I needed to. So now we have all of my students, and that's it, still in column A, and the grade that they got, and I've marked up here their points possible. And then I have also marked whether or not they're going to meet that benchmark, what the benchmark is and what the target is. So how did I come up with benchmarks and the target? So this is something that you can base on what your personal opinion is of this, what you feel like is appropriate for this, or perhaps what is accepted within the field that you work in, depending on what your learning outcome is that you're assessing at the time. So in this particular instance, the outcome that we're looking at, the outcome at question is students use computer and network technologies to gather, analyze, and communicate information. So to me, this assignment does assess knowledge and understanding of a topic in addition to the ability to utilize technology. Part of what I would expect my students to get from that would be you should be able to utilize technology to make more sense of the topic too, so that you understand it well enough that when you're doing your project, which this project is a summarized review of a topic they were assigned, one that was covered in class. And so they're meant to provide a summarized review of an assigned topic, and they can use any resources they need to anywhere in a library, on the internet, on their digital textbook, whatever it is. All of that is likely technology based to make sense of that topic and then put it in a summarized review presentation, which they will present to their fellow students either in person or on a recording that they submit or what have you. So there is a lot of technology use involved in this particular assignment, but some of it does relate back to understanding. So while I might consider a passing grade on the assignment overall as a 70%, I would hope that if you are utilizing technology effectively, and if that is part of what we're assessing here for this outcome, that I would want my students to have an 85% or higher as an individual student as a grade when assessing it in that context. So given the context, I've decided that my benchmark, okay, so the grade that I expect the student to get is an 85% or better. And that is based on, again, what my outcome is and what I believe that the students should be getting on this with regards to that outcome and what I think is acceptable for mastery for this. So that is my benchmark. And how many of my students do I expect to get that 85%? Well, for me, because technology is so ubiquitously used and you'd expect your students to be able to be proficient with technology and using computers and things, I set my target as 100%. So personally, I said 100% of my students should be getting an 85% or better on this assessment assignment. And that would be what I would consider mastery of this outcome. So my benchmark is 85% and my target is 100%. So that's how I delineated this. Now, this is largely based on my opinion of what I would expect my students to get at. As long as you can defend your position of what your target and your benchmark are, that's fine. This is based on what you expect your students to get from mastery. Now, if there is something official in place for what your target or your benchmark should be, one or the other or both, in your field, then of course follow that instead, and use pre-outlined things like that. But in this case, I'm developing my own benchmark and my own target for my students based on that. So now all I have to do is go and see if my students actually meet these. So did this student meet the benchmark of getting an 85%? So in this case, it's at 20 points possible. So that would be a 17-point minimum. So then I go through and I look at each of the grades and I mark whether or not it met the benchmark, 17 minimum. So this student down here got a 16, so no. And so I start that so that I could see that more easily in my data. And that's all the asterisks are going to stand for here, is to let me better visualize my data as I'm doing this. I have 78 students that I am looking at here. And then I've also divided it out as my traditional students versus my hybrid students. And now you're going to see quite a difference between the two in this data. It is significantly different. So so I start out with all of the students all together, and then I divided it out from my traditional to my hybrid. You may not even need to do that if you don't have separated, or if yours are all online based, or if yours are all, all in person, or if, certain courses are this or certain courses are that. You can divide this up however best works for you. But for me, I teach one course, microbiology, Introduction to Microbiology, MCRO 2124. And I have mostly traditional sections and one hybrid section in a semester. So I have all their data together, and I happen to know that the assessment form is going to ask me if there was any difference between the two. And in this particular case, if they'd all gotten 20 out of 20, great. Yeah, I mean, your work is done, right? Like, you don't have to worry about that. But they didn't. And so whenever it asked, was there a difference? Then you might want to look at that and say, oh, was there a difference? And in mine, there was a vast difference. So now I have all my data together. I'm going to start breaking it down. I have my total number of students, which is 78. I have the number of students who met the benchmark, which was 67, and the number of students who did not meet the benchmark, which was 11. Now, you can probably, if you're better with Excel, have this do the math for you, but I literally just counted my asterisks and then figured out which ones didn't and which ones did and did math. So that's how I figured that out. Then I used a calculator to do the math for. Again, you can have Excel do the work for you. But I just did my calculator, said 67 out of 78, 86% of my students earned an 85% or above on the assignment, whereas 14% of students did not earn an 85% or above on the assessment. So how is this relevant? Well, if 86% of my students earned an 85 or above, I wanted 100% of my students to get an 85 or above. So now we have not achieved mastery based on what my target and benchmark were. That does not mean that you get to change now what your target and your benchmark were. If you were comfortable with 100% of your students getting an 85 or above and they didn't meet that, that just means that we need to talk about that in the form that we're filling out, which we're going to get to. And this happens. And you might be perfectly 100% of your students got 85 or better, and that is great, but you still would want to talk about in your forms how you could make it even better for your students. And so that's always something you want to consider too. There's always room for improvement. And so you always want to mention that stuff as well. So now to the forms, shall we? All right, so this is the current campus-wide student learning outcome report form that we have. So I have filled out the top part, pretty basic stuff as far as what school and everything that you're in. This part should be basic for everybody. And check marked, this is our computer proficiency one here. And so now we're ready to start. Is this outcome associated with co-curricular activity or events? This one in my class is not. This is not co-curricular. My course isn't. So we will mark that as well. I have my title, my course number here. Does it include multiple course sections? Mine does. It's 4 different sections. The semester and the assessment year. And is this whole class or is it just a selected group? For whatever reason, you might just select a group for it. It doesn't have to be your whole class, but you want to be sure that whatever you select for your assessment process represents whatever your outcome is that you're assessing. So, so then it says go on and fill out this form. So on our second page here, let me change the view here. Okay, let me do this. Well, wasn't quite what I was looking for, but that's fine. There we go. That's what I wanted. I just want to go page by page. We can now look at number 1. Please describe the activity that you're using. If appropriate, attach a copy of the activity. So what I've done here is I filled out the box. Now, is it a direct method or an indirect? Mine was a presentation or project, basically, but it was essentially a presentation. So I've checked that box. That's what it is. So that's what we're going to leave it. We're going to actually assess this is not necessarily indirect. We're not going to be having discussions and having to describe how the discussion went or anything like that. We had a rubric for this. We had a grade for this. So this should be pretty straightforward to plug in and play. So now it wants an activity description. Now this was all blank and I've actually entered in everything from here down. So my assessment tool was my Unit 3 group project and I have briefly described it. Students were placed in groups. They were assigned a topic to summarize for the unit. They were allowed to use any reliable resources available to generate a summarized review, and they submit it to Canvas digitally and will also present in front of the class or submit a recording. Then I have a copy from our Canvas assignment page. Literally, that box that we had shown on that page with like the description of the assignment and what the students were expected to do, I just copied and pasted that in here so we could get an idea of what the students saw with regards to this project. And it's literally pasted from that. All right, next question. So that's how I'm describing my, what is this asking for? Describe the activity. And I've also included the actual activity itself, right? So as far as what instructions they were given. If you want to include examples of your student work, you can put that in here as well to give a better representation of what was expected of the students. So you can include that too. It just gives more information for people that are reviewing your assessment as to whether or not this is enough to say that this was an effective assessment method or not. So how do you evaluate our learning? What measure do you use? I used a rubric, and so I just copied and pasted the rubric. So I said a rubric was incorporated into the Canvas assignment, see screenshot below, and that's where I got my grades from this. Let me change this before I forget to, so I want this to be in line with that so you can tell that this is what I typed as opposed to what the question was. This is pretty small and you can't see it well, but the idea is that I will be submitting this in a document format. So if they need to make it bigger to be able to read it better, they can. It's there for them to make it bigger or smaller as needed. So what is the target achievement level? Okay, so this one I have to get a little creative. I have to explain why I'm choosing my targets and my benchmarks. I've done that for you guys already, but just to summarize again, I said We're largely using computer-based resources, but it is still going to be based on understanding of the material as well. So I went with a benchmark of 85% as the grade that they needed to meet this. Since computers and technology are so widely used, I expect that 100% of my students meet that benchmark. Everybody should be using a computer effectively. All right, and so therefore 100% of students, and I reiterate it here, is expected that 100% of students achieve a grade of 85% or higher in order for me to consider this as mastered. And that's what I've decided here. So what data resulted from this learning activity? So they have it broken down from A down to these subsets down here, and I'll walk you through each of them. What data did you get? Attach a copy if you need to. So if multiple course sections are evaluated, how many total students achieved the target? Well, I include my total is 67, and I say of 78 total students achieve the target across 4 sections. So I've described there how many sections I have and how many total students. What is the overall percentage? 85%. So this roughly 85% of, I believe it was 86. Actually, now that I'm looking back at it, delete that 86. If I bring up my chart here, we had 86% of my students. So there's that. So 86% of my students earned an 85% or above. So we'll go back to that. What is the overall percentage? 86%. The number of students that meet the target versus the total number of students. So we have 67 out of 78. Did I include any withdrawn students or any non-participating students? I did not on mine. So I'm pulling mine at the end of the semester. So I'm pulling the data from my students that actually made it to the end of the semester. Now, if you feel like you need to include your data on your withdrawn students, maybe they performed well on this and you felt like they should give their shot. They did this assignment. You just don't, they just didn't get included in the final grade system, but you want their grade included on your assessment thing, and that is fine. If you feel like that is applicable to what you're doing, great. Include the data that you feel is necessary regarding this. Now, I didn't have any withdrawn students or any non-participating students for this particular assignment. All of my students that had already withdrawn for this assignment. All of my non-participating students, I didn't have any on this assignment. So you will just put NA for those to let them know, hey, I read this question. I saw it. I didn't have any that fall under the category of withdrawn or non-participating. It says, were both on-campus and online courses evaluated? If so, break it down. So I did. I looked at my traditional in-person totals and then my hybrid totals, and I put how many sections fall in with each. So the total number of traditional students I had, the total number of traditional students who met the benchmark, that's annoying, versus the total number of traditional students who did not, and then compare the same for my hybrid. Now, if we look at this, if you look at this traditional versus the hybrid, the total number of my traditional students that met the benchmark was 56 out of 56. For my hybrid students, when we look at that, the total students that got an 85 or above was 50%, meaning that 50% did not get an 85 or above. That is drastically different from the 100% from my traditional classes that got an 85% or above. They all got 20 out of 20 in my traditional classes. My hybrid classes, they did not. Half of them got acceptable scores. So now we can actually look at the data. I included the data for my hybrid students like very directly so you could see their grade breakdown. These are the only ones that got the asterisks on the bigger one that we had out here. So all of these stars actually happen to be for my hybrid. So now we're looking at the data and we're actually assessing whether or not there's an issue going on here. Now you can start to see that there is, right? So reflect on that data and what does it reveal? So I go on to summarize, and you're welcome to read this whole thing if you like to, but I go on to summarize that essentially my data indicates that students overall, they aren't meeting the target that I set for them of that 100% getting 85% or better. They're not meeting it, but that if you break it down, you see that the problem is lying with the hybrid students. And I go on to speculate that this is likely due to discrepancy in the interpretation of what the expectation of the assignment was between my traditional versus my hybrid groups. So likely I'm not explaining the assignment well enough. I'm not giving enough of some sort of an example for them to follow, a detailed enough idea to work from. So I say, in my opinion, this is discrepancy of what's expected on the assignment between the traditional and the hybrid. And it's been my experience, hybrid students tend not to have as much drive or motivation, especially whenever they're not they're not giving clear instructions on something. And it's likely due to a lack of interpersonal interaction that could be a part playing in this. Now, we can see here that the actual assignment, like putting together a presentation and using a computer to do that, that part might not itself be a problem, but that the instructions that were given for the assignment that we're using for the assessment might be the problem. And that might be the case for you. It might be your actual assignment that needs some improving, or it could be that yours is fine. And so you're just going to write up what your data says. Oh, my data reflects exactly what I was hoping that my students would do. Everybody's performing well. Considering that this has been working well for me in the past, this is no surprise here. And whatever, you summarize that in your own words. Or if you think that the assignment is lacking, you'd want to make some remarks on, well, it seems that the assignment that I've written up isn't challenging them enough, or it's challenging them too much to know too much about how to use Excel or how to use PowerPoint or certain features of those things. And maybe that's too challenging for them, and I need to adjust the assignment to compensate for that. For me, I am determining that it's likely due to the instructions being unclear or the expectations of the assignment being unclear. So then the next question is, what are you going to do about it? And so I say, well, as it turns out, my group work didn't go very groupy, if you will. Okay. So I'm changing this assignment as it is to being an individual assignment for next semester. As it turns out, some students just weren't able to adult enough. And so we're going to change that to an individual assignment to, try to harbor a little bit more responsibility for one's own grade. So that's great. I'm going to turn that into an individual assignment, but I still want to not just say, oh, it's going to be individual next time. That's going to take care of itself, because that doesn't assess the problem that you might not be writing your assignment clearly enough, right? So I go on to say, we're going to make this an individual assignment. However, regardless of that, I will be adapting this going forward by taking care to provide detailed examples. I will be clearly outlining expectations in all of my assignments, not just this one, but taking care to go back to my instructions for all of my assignments, make sure that they are clear. And if they need any detailed examples, I will include those. And then regular announcements or other updates from me personally that are not necessarily automated to help clarify the expectations on these assignments. And so that is essentially what I will be doing to improve this assignment as my assessment tool for this learning outcome. And so that is how I have filled this out. That is the form in all of its completion. A lot of this is just all about getting that data nice and clean and outlined for your use. And then just explaining what changes you want to make if you want to make any. Now, if yours turns out perfect and everybody's getting 20 out of 20 on your assignment and everybody's doing great, you still might add on ways that you might, even if you expect 100 of your students to get 100, how else might you challenge them a little bit more to increase the effectiveness of their learning in regards to that outcome, if necessary? Now, if you think it's well and good, and it's been practiced well and assessed well and everything like that, then for your actions that you will take regarding this assessment activity in future courses, you would say something along the lines of, well, I feel that this assessment tool works well as a means of assessing this learning outcome, and that no further changes are necessary, but that, we will still be diligent in, collecting our data to ensure that this continues throughout time, because it might change and you might need to change it in the future. So you do still want to make remarks like that, acknowledging that that this was an effective tool, but you still want to keep an eye on it. So just be sure that as you are filling out this form that you are being detailed with it as much as you can, including the details that you need, but not too many superfluous ones. If you want to include examples, if you were me and you wanted to include an example of the type of thing that you expected students to submit, you could even give student examples in here, then you could do that as well. And they will look at that data and determine if they agree with you that you were effective at teaching this learning, objective, this learning outcome, if you actually achieved the outcome that you wanted, or if you didn't, and if you are actually making changes that should move towards student success, right? So always keep that in mind, that whatever you're putting on this form should support student success, not just checking the box that you did your assessment and that. So here you're hearing from somebody that gets very detailed about outcomes and things like this, and yet still on my outcome, I didn't have success. And that happens, and that's okay, as long as you are willing to make the changes and show that you are improving over time with these things. This is only my second time assessing this particular learning outcome. And when I assessed it the first time, I didn't use this assignment, and I used a different assignment that I no longer have as part of uh, my course, because that particular assignment didn't really jive well with how I wanted my students to be learning overall. It worked well with computers, but maybe not necessarily with the course overall. So I had to change it. And so I can't track necessarily from that assignment, 2 years later to this assignment and see the difference there. As far as that goes. And not to mention, I didn't have benchmarks or targets last time. I didn't know about them. This is my very first time ever using benchmarks and targets. You're learning along with me. So if you guys have any questions about that, I will help where I can, but I'm still very new at it myself. Personally, the whole reason I'm making this video is because I've always gotten, excellent results back from my assessments. And I thought it might help some of you who had areas to work on to have an idea of why I write the things the way that I do and how I get excellent feedback from these things. The only remark that I've ever had made on any of my assessments in the past is that I might want to include benchmarks and targets. And so I did this time. So if this helps any of you with organizing your assessment and seeing like what it is, what it's about, how to organize your data, and how to put it into the form, I hope that this helps you. If you need any help with it going forward, let me know and I will do what I can. And of course, Joyce is always out there to help us. And anybody else that that might be good with assessment, I'm sure that they'd be willing to help you if you could just reach out. There's no need to feel like you're drowning and have no clue what's expected of you with assessment going forward. I highly recommend taking the Assessment 101 course on Canvas if you have not done so. It helps you plan this stuff out in a little bit more detail than maybe what is necessary for, completing the form directly, but it does help you put it into perspective on how to be effective with this stuff. It exists for a reason. HLC expects us to meet these expectations for a reason. It's for the benefit of our students. And so we want to be effective at assessing them so that we can prove that we are in fact teaching our students what we say we're teaching them. And that's the whole point of assessment, to make sure that we're actually teaching our students the things that we say that we are, either on big mind scale, if you will, with these sort of campus-wide learning ones, or on your more specific subject or department level, project level, whatever it is that you're looking at. So I hope this is somewhat helpful for you guys. And if I can help at all in any of the process, feel free to reach out to me. Again, it's lauren.yost@okstate.edu. You guys can always find me by searching in Outlook and whatever. And I'm here to help. And I hope this was helpful. And good luck with assessment.